Sense innovative solutions that will reform government and create smaller government that will serve its citizens better. Prior to that, he was a commissioner on the Fiscal Crisis Inquiry Commission. He was also the chief economist for the President's Council of Economic Advisors and director of the Congressional Budget Office. We think we're supposed to say nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office every time we say that. Take it away.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the chance to be here. Tax reform is all the talk of Washington, and Washington loves to talk about tax reform. So the first thing I want to say is that everything that I'm about to suggest is really hard to get done. Next year, on my birthday, as it was that February 3rd, you can remember that, the income tax will turn 100. February 3rd, 1913, the 16th Amendment was ratified, giving the federal government the right to impose an income tax. And in those 100 years, you can count on less than one hand the number of comprehensive reworkings of the tax code. And so as a going-in proposition, the kinds of things that would be desirable are very hard to get done. And for that reason, I very much endorse the kinds of things that, for example, the House of Representatives just did in passing legislation that provides a fast-track authority to undertake tax reform within certain parameters. Of course, no Congress can tie the hands of a successor Congress, we understand that, but anything that can grease the skids a little bit toward getting tax reform done, I think we should favor, because we have a mess on our hands in the tax code right now. So my hope is we'll get it done. My hope is that it'll get done next year. And the reasons are at least twofold, perhaps more. Number one, the United States suffers from dual problems of bad growth and big debt. As this audience probably knows, we have federal debt that exceeds the size of the economy. We're over 100% debt to GDP ratios. When you get to that level, the research literature shows that you suffer two penalties. Penalty number one is you grow more slowly. We are suffering that penalty right now. And penalty number two is that you have a higher probability of sovereign debt crisis and financial panics. And the bad news about the research is it gives you no hint as to what triggers those and when they happen. And so I am deeply concerned that the United States is closer to the edge of that abyss than it should be, and that we need to fix it. Same research literature says if you want to fix it, there are really two kinds of strategies that work. Strategy number one is keep taxes low, and if you can at all reform them to be more pro-growth, do so. And that's a major reason for tax reform at this time in the United States. We need to do that. Second thing that the literature shows, you have to cut spending to control the debt, and that the most important kind of spending to cut is transfer programs, which means in the United States entitlement reforms, instead of adding them as we just did, we should control them so that we don't have this explosive debt. So one part of the big fix for our problems is to do tax reform, and that's a big motivation for tax reform in 2013. The second is that the tax code is supposed to raise money necessary to finance the core functions of government, and that's what it's supposed to do. It's not supposed to do anything else, and in the process of doing that, it should interfere as little as possible and impose as little as possible values on the private sector. It should be there to raise money in as neutral a fashion as possible and to fund the core functions of government. That's not what we have. We don't have anything close to that. And in my view, we ought to move the tax code to a tax code that A, has some sort of meaning to it. It stands for something. What I would have that be is that we should tax people on the basis of what they take out of the economy, what they consume, and not tax them on the basis of what they contribute. That kind of a tax reform that moves us in that direction would be much more favorable to saving and investments. One of the reasons a pro-growth tax reform helps get better growth, and that's an imperative at this moment as well. And so how do you get there? Well, tax reform is not hard until you do it. You can take everything we have right now and move it to be far more sensible in a couple of steps. Step number one is we stop handicapping our large, successful global companies with the world's worst corporate income tax. At the moment, if a U.S. firm is competing with a German firm for Brazilian business, and this is our future, because 95% of the world's consumers are outside our borders, The German firm pays any Brazilian tax and is done. The US firm pays the Brazilian tax, and then, because we have the highest corporate tax rate in the world, it pays a second layer of tax back in the United States. As a going-in proposition, they start out at a disadvantage. And we lose the market penetration, we lose the ability to earn those incomes around the globe, and we need to get our rate down to be internationally competitive. At the end of the Tax Reform Act of 1986, we had a corporate income tax that was low by international standards. We have stood still, and everyone else is becoming more aggressive. And we need to get the rate down to 25% just to get in the game, and lower if we can. And we also have to move away from taxing our firms on the basis of global income, and instead do what every other major developed country does, and tax on the basis only of their activity in the United States. Income in Brazil, income in the Czech Republic are taxed under their tax rules and not twice back in the US. That would be an enormous step in the right direction. Inside that tax, firms ought to be able to do immediate cost recovery for capital expenditures. Get rid of all the games that we play and trying to keep track of depreciation. Stop trying to figure out how quickly an intangible asset like a patent really decays in value. The minute an expense is incurred, whether it's a capital expense, a labor expense, or another expense, it should be immediately subtracted from the tax. That equalizes all sorts of investments. If you want to invest in your workers, it's expense. You want to invest in your R&D, it's expense. You want to invest in your physical capital, it's expensed. You stop having the tax code drive investment decisions, and you give real incentives to invest right up front. In the same way, you shouldn't have the tax code double taxing equity investments, right? You don't get to, at the corporate level, deduct your dividend payments, you pay tax there, and then they get taxed again at the individual level. Equalize the tax treatment of dividends, interest, capital gains, preferably at zero, and just stop having the tax system drive the financial structure of America's firms. We've seen what happens when you have leverage, and leverage can be very dangerous. Why should the tax code reward leverage? So over at the corporate side, and again, and those businesses taxed as pass-through entities on the individual, that's what we have to aim for. That has to be a fundamental goal of tax reform, to make us grow more rapidly and to make us be more internationally competitive. Over on the individual side, you want to essentially turn everything into a large IRA, where if you save it and don't consume it, it escapes tax. When you bring it out and consume it, you're done. And since I don't think of passing money to my children as anything like a consumption activity, we should get rid of the estate tax entirely. And so that's all there is to it. We need low rates, bases, and that's what I think you should look for. Now, I am now old and somewhat beaten, and I recognize that not everyone thinks like I do, and that they view the tax code as either an instrument of social justice or social policy, and look to have rewards to particular activities like particular schooling or particular activities of their choice. Some people view it as just this issue of fairness, and they got to talk about how fair the tax code is. So I know that those are out there, but and that the actual tax code will reflect some of those influences. That's a reality I can accept. But you should not negotiate with yourself. So going in, we should aim for the right thing, and in the process of making those trade-offs for different objectives, we should recognize that at this moment in our time, there is nothing more important than growing rapidly. We will not address the debt problems we have without rapid growth. We will not hand to our children the economy they deserve without the capacity for rapid growth. And so when you make those trade-offs, make them on the side of growth and get as clean a tax code as you can. And I'm an optimist by nature. I now drink every night, but I'm hoping that with the right leadership in 2013, we can get as close to that kind of tax code as possible. Thank you.
That's a fantastic overview.